I'd always known my mom was uncomfortable with my work, but I didn't know why. Early on, I took some of my friends on a tour of a nearby clinic, and she came with me. And walking through, she became very overwhelmed. When I wasn't looking, she ducked into a nearby room and began to cry. Someone from the clinic noticed her and asked her what was wrong. "My son doesn't know," she said, "and I will never tell him." Now, my mom and I are really close. And ever since I was a kid, she taught me how to read. Growing up, my mom was incredibly sensitive. And she was also the rock in our family, unfazed by some of the most trying social circumstances in life. And so what happened at the clinic that night was different. It was unusual. As I began to think about this, I didn't know this happened, but my mom had a change of heart. Over some time, it was a courageous change of heart. And as I watched it happen, something happened I never expected. She sat me down on the couch a few years after that night and told me a story, the story she swore she never would, about a time when she was growing up in a small town, White Bear Lake, Minnesota, with a devout Catholic mother and a father who was a World War II vet with a spotless reputation and the character that had earned it. She was in a relationship at the time, and she thought she might be in love. And at 19, just finishing high school, she had her whole future ahead of her. But in a single moment, everything changed. She found out she was pregnant. She was in shock, and when she found out, there were a lot of thoughts swirling through her head, but only one that she could make out clearly. Her father could never find out. If he did, she knew he'd disapprove of the relationship, but even worse, she couldn't face him. She couldn't bring the shame of unwed pregnancy on someone like that. So she went to Planned Parenthood, and they referred her to a hospital nearby where she could get this taken care of discreetly. No one would have to know. So she made an appointment, and she went there with her boyfriend one day, and as she walked up into the elevator to go up a floor and get the procedure done, she lost her balance in despair. And her boyfriend caught her, and he realized she might not want to go through with this, and so he mustered up a little bit of courage, and she said, "Wait, you don't have to do this. I'll get a job. I'll marry you." Big words, but she couldn't hear them. The only voice in her head she could hear was that her father could never find out. And so, feeling more boxed in than she'd ever felt in her whole life, she went through with it. And she hoped that was the end. But 2 days later, she began hemorrhaging. Blood was everywhere. She was rushed back to the hospital where the hemorrhaging stopped, but she had to stay there overnight. Her worried parents came to visit. And she managed for a moment to conceal the truth. But a little while later, a bill came in the mail describing my mom's condition as post-abortion bleeding. My mom found the bill in the mail before her dad came home one day, and panicked, she rushed back to the hospital. At 19 years old, she marched in and demanded to speak with anyone who could help. She was ushered into a room where there were several medical professionals, and she explained her situation. She begged them to change this because this was supposed to be a secret all along. He could never find out. And so they did. They changed it to read bleeding from an irregular period and sent her home. 2 months later, my mom's relationship with her boyfriend deteriorated, and they broke up. He turned to drugs, and she began drinking to deal with all the brokenness that she was feeling inside. And for the next few decades, this decision followed her around. 30 years later, with pain in her eyes and deep in her heart, she told me, her oldest son, for the very first time. This story broke my heart, that someone so close to me would feel so much shame because of something that had happened so long ago, and I felt helpless. Since that moment, I've begun to consider a single question. I've been very passionate about finding an answer to it. How do we build a culture of vulnerability where in their moment of greatest need, the people in our lives find real human connection? I believe the conversation about unplanned pregnancy in America needs to change. And yes, as I've said sentences like that, I've been confronted many times by many well-meaning people that wanted to inform me that I am indeed a guy. And since the beginning, it's been made very clear to me that there are many other issues I could speak on with much more ease than this one. But I'm very passionate about this because I believe the current conversation is fueling disconnection. And so no matter where you stand on this issue, I want to challenge you to hear me out. As I've sat with people and listened to them share their unplanned pregnancy stories, something I do in my job, one thing has become very clear. Abortion is fundamentally a breakdown in community. In our moment of greatest need for real, compassionate, empowering human relationship, there is a void of connection. I was 19 years old when I first heard that story, studying political science in college and on fire. I'd led community education efforts, organized peaceful protests, and spoken on the floor of the Arizona legislature about this, one of the most polarizing subjects in American politics. But after that story, I had to take a step back. A question lingered about how I was communicating. Was I really changing hearts, or was I just making the people who disagreed with me more passionate about their disagreement? For a moment, we put the signs down and put a pause on the rallies as I began to wonder whether I lived in a world where there were a lot of people like my mom who'd experienced unplanned pregnancy, isolation, and shame, and it was stuffed deep down. I fear we live in a world where the only people who can't freely express their thoughts about unplanned pregnancy are the ones going through it. And that matters because behind this debate are real people, women, their partners, their parents, their friends, and their communities. On issues this polarizing, I've become convicted that we can really only change things for the better and help people when we're listening. That in the words of Jane Goodall, sometimes change happens by listening. Last year, my team and I decided to take this idea on the road. Working on a documentary, we did 130 in-depth interviews with strangers about their unplanned pregnancies, abortions, or pregnancy scares. We started in Phoenix and went all the way up to Seattle, stopping in big West Coast cities in between, and the rules were simple. No politics, no opinions, just get the true story of unplanned pregnancy in America told by the people who knew it best. Now, if you can imagine for a moment sitting in your lunch break and being approached by a couple of people with a camera and asked about a previous unplanned pregnancy you might have had in your life, we got plenty of rejection. But it wasn't all rejection. Sure enough, people began to open up, like they'd never shared these experiences before, and maybe it's because they hadn't. As we began to listen, it became really clear this void of connection was painfully real. I want to share with you a few of the stories that I think are representative of the broader narrative that we encountered along the way. First, we encountered this void of connection repeatedly in relationships with parents. One girl I interviewed in Seattle told me that she had a sister who'd experienced an unplanned pregnancy, one she carried to term and delivered during finals week in college. But when her sister broke the news to her parents that she was pregnant, they responded, "That's the one thing we asked you not to do." And they asked her to pack her things and leave the house. After watching this happen to her sister, the girl we interviewed told us that she herself had experienced a pregnancy scare in high school. And when that happened, she told us, if I was pregnant, I already knew my choice because I didn't want to be kicked out or disowned by my own family. We also saw this void of connection in relationships with partners. One woman we interviewed in Phoenix told us about a time when she found out she was pregnant. She was in college at the time, and she just moved back home. She was sharing a room with her siblings and didn't feel ready for this at all. She finally mustered up the courage to tell the guy, and when she did, what he said dramatically affected her. He was like, "Well, I guess you should probably go find your child's father." And he walked away, leaving her to face this uncertain future alone. We saw this void of connection in other places in the community too, where pregnant students were made fun of in school, where women had to face an impossible choice between their job and their child, and where whole neighborhoods whispered their disapproval. One woman we interviewed in Los Angeles told us that when she thought she might be pregnant, she panicked because where she was from, people would talk, and reputation was everything. She told us something that really affected us as we were getting this story, and it was this, that being 18 and pregnant, she said, is really just the worst thing that could happen to someone growing up where I did. She grew up in Beverly Hills, California, but we experienced the same sentiment in Phoenix, San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle, everywhere we went. This void of connection left scars, and for many people, trust issues lingered for decades afterward. One woman I interviewed in Portland told me about an unplanned pregnancy she had had 20 years ago. It had ended in miscarriage, and she was only pregnant for a few months, but she remembered the time she called the guy, and when it was their last conversation ever, he hung up and never called her again. She remembered the way she felt rejected by her parents and her friends who judged her for being sexually careless. To this day, she said, it had left an indelible mark on her psyche, such that she wondered, when things are going good, sure, everybody's going to be around, but when things aren't so good, what happens? People get abortions for a lot of reasons. But every year in America, at least 400,000 women get abortions because of relationships, because they don't have the support of their partners, parents, friends, communities, medical professionals, and employers. And this is heartbreaking. This is heartbreaking. This is the void of connection. And it spans the full length of the most important relationships we have in life. As we went on this journey, it became clear that the true story of unplanned pregnancy in America is really a story about love and fear. And here's what I mean by that. Unplanned pregnancy, when we are overwhelmed by stress and experience this type of disconnection, can be a traumatic experience. Our fight, flight, or freeze instincts are activated in our brains when this happens. And the rational decision-making part of our brains is unengaged. The survival decision maker takes over. In other words, we make decisions out of fear. By fear, I mean a state of mind we can't get out of on our own, where we're alone and we feel like we need to stay alone to protect ourselves, where the circumstances in our life feel so big that we are dominated by them. In this mental state, we can't make decisions out of love. Love is the power in the midst of our circumstances to rationally seek after what's best for ourselves and for others. And here's the thing that became very clear for people in this circumstance. Humans are incapable of making decisions out of love unless someone has shown it to them. And that's where you come in. Real support isn't simple. I'm not talking about rationally trying to convince someone to do something when they're just trying to survive. They can't hear you. And I'm not talking about passively affirming the decisions of another person, whether you agree with them or not. That's not real friendship. Our real friends, the ones who connect with us in these moments, are the ones who listen compassionately first, honestly share what they believe to be in our best interest, and then walk alongside us every step of the way, no matter what we decide. This is the type of friendship that empowers someone stuck in survival mode to breathe again, to feel safe, and to take power back over their circumstances. So, how do we build a culture of vulnerability where, in their moment of greatest need, the people in our lives experience real human connection? When it comes to unplanned pregnancy, I think we're a long ways off, but I think there are 3 important steps we need to take together. First, we need to change the way we react to unplanned pregnancy. We need parents who make it known to their daughters and to their sons that unplanned pregnancy is something they're willing to face together. We need friends who ask her how she's feeling and make it clear they're willing to walk alongside her every step of the way. We need young men who embrace fatherhood even when it means giving something that they've never received. In a nation where only 12% of working women have access to paid maternity leave, we need employers who implement pro-mom workplace policies so no one has to choose between their job and their child. We need classmates who shut down gossip. We need school administrators and teachers who help pregnant students graduate and go get the bright futures that await them. And we need medical professionals who, when delivering a diagnosis of a disability prenatally, give honest, empowering information to parents instead of a list of things their child will never do. This is how we build a culture of connection. The second thing we need to do is we need to make it clear to the people in our lives, people we're close to, that we'll be there for them when it matters. The most startling thing we learned from interviewing 130 strangers about unplanned pregnancy was that it was entirely possible and common for someone to feel completely alone, even if technically they weren't. Even if the people around them really might have stood by them. My mom's father never did find out about her abortion, but about a year after it happened, my mom's brother and his girlfriend got pregnant. And my mom watched her brother break the news to her father. She watched her father respond to her surprise gently. He had some advice, but he wished only the best. Never did my mom feel more regret. Maybe she wasn't alone. Maybe it just felt that way. Remind your kids, your partner, and the people close to you that you'll be there for them when it matters, and never assume they already know that. The third way that we can build a culture of real human connection in this moment is by sharing our stories. And not to weaponize them for political purposes, but because real healing from past pain starts with vulnerability. It starts there. Opening up about an unplanned pregnancy or abortion that you've had in this country is a very difficult thing to do, and it takes a lot of courage. But there is no more powerful tool for real human connection that we have than our stories. And your story could help someone who feels as stuck and alone today as you did then. I'm a witness to the power of this courage and the change that these stories can make. My mom is here in the audience today, and she's watching the story she feels the most regret and shame about in the whole world being shared with a global audience at TEDx, in the hopes that one day there will be communities all around the world where no one who faces unplanned pregnancy feels alone, and where the most important decisions in life are made out of love and not fear. And I think that's a day worth fighting for. Thank you.